Good afternoon and welcome to the Land Use and Transportation Committee for today, June 19th, 2017. I am the acting chair of the committee, Aaron Peskin, joined by two non-committee members, but committee members for the day. To my right, Board President London Breed, and to my left, Supervisor Asha Safai. We need a motion to excuse Supervisor Tang, who is across the hall in Budget Committee deliberations, and a motion to excuse Supervisor Farrell. Okay, we have a motion to excuse those two. Without objection, that motion is adopted. Our clerk is Ms. Erica Major. Ms. Major, do you have any announcements?
Yes, please make sure to silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Completed speaker cards and copies of any documents to be included as part of a file should be submitted to the clerk. Items acted upon today will appear on the June 27th Board of Supervisors agenda unless otherwise stated.
Ms. Major, could you read the one and only item on our agenda today?
Yes, item number 1 is an ordinance amending the planning code to revise the amount of inclusionary affordable housing fee and the on-site and off-site affordable housing alternatives and other inclusionary housing requirements.
Thank you, Ms. Major. They said it could not be done, but it appears that we have reached some consensus on this inclusionary affordable housing legislation. I want to thank Supervisor Safai and Supervisor Breed and Supervisor Kim for all working together over the past many months to get it to this point. And most particularly, I would like to thank for her patience as she has watched the vicissitudes of these negotiations and had to make sense of them. Our Deputy City Attorney, Kate Stacy. Thank you, Ms. Stacy, for putting up with all four of us and working very quickly on very short notice as we continue to change our minds and argue amongst ourselves in a mostly pretty constructive fashion. So with that, we have a very, very simple task today, which is to introduce amendments to the subject ordinance. And I think we have one little change to what Ms. Stacy has drafted at page 28 on line, top of page 29, first line, which is to scratch the June 15th, 2017 date and return it to what it originally was in an earlier draft of January 1st of 2015. So we will do that. Can we do that without objection? So motion made by myself, and without objection, we will, first we should take all of the amendments, Deputy City Attorney Givner. So we'll have plenty of public comment. All right. Are there any members of the public who would like to testify on this item number 1? I didn't say members of city staff. All right. Public comment is closed. Are there any members of city staff who would like to speak to this item, Ms. Rogers or your colleague? Please come forward. And we don't need your PowerPoint.
Absolutely. Thank you, Supervisors Jacob Bentler.
Only because I'm dying to go back across the hall for Budget Committee.
Where the real fun is. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Supervisors, for your time. Jacob Bentler with the City Planning Department. Just want to quickly convey the recommendations from the Planning Commission from last Thursday. Again, the Commission really was very thankful and appreciative for all of the work you have done with your colleagues to come to a unity ordinance. And they simply were looking at things that were deemed material modifications from the previous versions of the ordinance that they had seen. So there were 6 things on that list. They put in some recommendations on 5 of those things and also some technical recommendations from staff regarding program implementation. So really quickly, their recommendations were on the dwelling unit mix, that it include the 3-bedroom requirement within the total amount rather than being additive to the 25%. Regarding minimum unit sizes, the recommendation was to reference the TCAC statewide minimums directly rather than putting in fixed numbers that don't reference that.
Except for that TCAC doesn't have a studio definition, but we created one for you.
Okay, so that was the recommendation there. On studio unit, also similar issue with studio units. There was a prohibition on having 100% or greater AMI households in studio units. The Commission recommended to not have such a prohibition so as to allow us to evenly distribute the units to households of whatever income size and not concentrate low-income households in studio units. The fourth recommendation was regarding requirements in specific areas. It was the Mission, the Tenderloin, and then the Soma NCT in 2 districts. Recommendation there was absolutely study that, see if that's appropriate, but the recommendation from the Commission was to keep them at the citywide level along with the rest of the city until such appropriate study has been concluded, and at that time to consider whether or not specific areas of the city should have higher requirements. Fifth and finally, on the material modifications, regarding the fee percentage at 30% for rental and 33% for condo, those are higher than the maximum feasible amount from the controller study. So the Commission recommendation was, again, perfectly appropriate, and we would like to see the TAC and the Controller's Office study those as well when they study the methodology of the fee as required in the current consensus ordinance by the end of or by January of 2018. So again, the recommendation there was similar on those area-specific requirements, which was let's do the study and then look at whether or not there's a reason to have those rates be higher than the maximum economically feasible amount. Specifically, this was a material modification because of the requirement that bonus units pay the fee amount. So the concern was that because this fee is above the feasible amount, it could be a de facto disincentive, a new disincentive to use the state density bonus program because those fees are so high. So the Commission recommended that that be studied by the TAC and the Controller as well. Really quickly, the technical items, grandfathering just for everything other than the rates that were established in Prop C for the pipeline projects between 2013 and 2016 to just make clear when the new rules apply, such as the AMI tiers. So the recommendation there was to add clarifying language into the grandfathering in the application section of the law that says if you have an EEA after January 12th, 2016, you're playing by all the new rules. If you have it before January 12th, 2016, you play by the old rules of 415, except for those specific incremental increases that were from Prop C. So that was so we can provide clarity to sponsors about what the requirements are. Similarly, there was a recommendation on the technical side about sunsetting and entitlement. The recommendation from Commission was that the rate be established at the EEA point, and then that there be 30 months from entitlement to a first construction document, and that after that point, if no first construction document after 30 months, that it be reset to the rate of the day given the schedule of annual increases. That was so that staff can appropriately advise the public and sponsors of what the obligation is up front at the beginning of the entitlement process to be consistent with our planning department procedures, also working in the 30-month time frame rather than the 36-month time frame.
You can slow down just a little.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so that's the sunsetting and the entitlement provisions. There were 3 more on the technical side. One is the issue of rounding. So because we have the 3 AMI tiers, that could cumulatively add up if you round it in each category to an amount that's actually higher than like the 18 or the 20%, let's say. So there's just simple clarifying language that was recommended by the Commission, which is to say that in no case should the actual total percent of your BMR units required by 415 be over what the amount should be in total, 18, 20%, whatever it is in any given year. There was another recommendation about a map that is referenced in order for the Planning Department and MoCD to make sure that no inclusionary units are within 20% of what the market rate is in that same neighborhood. So, of course, you have to define what the neighborhood is. There was a reference to a map that was simply not the map that the Planning Department uses for demographic analysis purposes. So the Commission recommended language specifying that it be the American Community Survey demographic profile map so that we can actually have that analysis done in a way that builds up from census tracts. But there's still neighborhoods that we feel that most San Francisco's identify as real neighborhoods. And finally, there was a 10th technical recommendation from the Commission that was really forwarded to us by the Office of Community Infrastructure and Investment. Staff is here from OCII to speak to that if you have any questions. This is because the Trans-Bay area is governed by the Trans-Bay Redevelopment Plan and state law. That section of the code, 249.28, does reference Section 415. Since Section 415 has changed, OCI wanted to make clear how it applied in their area. So Commission recommended the text changes to the ordinance in that section, not in Section 415, to make clear that the higher of the redevelopment number, the 15% there, or the citywide inclusionary rate would apply. So that would always be the 18 or 20% or higher. It was also to ensure that only on-site units would be provided in the Trans-Bay redevelopment area rather than off-site or fee. And finally, that it be 100% AMI for condos and 60% AMI maximum for rental, just to keep the Trans-Bay area consistent with the Trans-Bay redevelopment plan, which is governed by state law. So that was the final recommendation from the Planning Commission. I'm here with the Planning Department, Anne Marie Rogers as well. As I said, OCII staff available. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jacob. And Deputy City Attorney Stacey, I think given the timeline, it was our inclination to accommodate OCII in trailing legislation. So we don't need to hear from OCII. For members of the public who just walked in, we took public comment, but I think many of you will be very happy to know that on page 29, the original date in the legislation relative to conducting fiscal feasibility on area plans and special use districts remains or has been returned to January 1st of 2015, so that language is exactly as it used to be. We are in the middle of budget, so I'm toggling back and forth, but you should all be happy to hear that, and I think that addresses many of your concerns. Again, I want to thank Kate Stacy. I would like to have a motion to adopt the amendments before us, together with that further amendment on page 29, line 1, to have the date read January 1st, 2015. Deputy City Attorney Givner, it looks like you wish to say something.
I do. A couple things. One, I think it would be valuable if someone, because these are amendments on top of amendments, could run through, even at a relatively high level, the amendments that are being adopted today.
Deputy City Attorney Stacy, would you like to do that? It's your life's work.
Let me say number two while she thinks about whether that's possible or maybe needs to run up and get another version that shows today's amendments a little more clearly. Second, there is an amendment in this document that is a material modification requiring referral back to planning.
207.7 will be heard by the Planning Commission on July 6th and will get to us on our second reading.
Okay, but that means that, that you could adopt all the amendments proposed today except for 207.7, or even just the subsection in 207.7, but it might be cleaner to just not include 207.7 at all in the version that you send out to the full board. And with the duplicate version, it would sit in committee until the Planning Commission.
All right, so we'll duplicate the file. The file that we send forward will not have the 207.7 language. Ms. Rogers, you will have the Planning Commission hear that material change on 6 July 2017, and then that will catch up with the legislation at our meeting of 11 July 2017, and we will add that in at that time. Second reading. Yeah, the second reading will then become the first reading, or however we want to do it. Or we'll just do the 207.7 alone, and it will fold in. Turn your microphone on.
Oh, sorry. Deputy, are you able to read those amendments?
Supervisors, I will go through the notes that Planning has just handed me. I will do my best. Kate Stacy from the City Attorney's Office. In the application section 415.3, there is some clarification in a new subsection D on page 11 of the draft about the application of different inclusionary requirements in eastern neighborhoods, north of Market, and SOMA districts, and a distribution about how the on-site affordable units would be allocated, where 15% for rental units, 15% of the on-site affordable units would be affordable to low-income households, 5% for moderate-income households, and 5% for middle income. And then for owned units in those districts, 15% would be low-income units, 6% moderate income, and 6% middle income. Excuse me. And then if you go to section 415.5, the affordable housing fee, there is a change of how the Inclusionary Housing Technical Advisory Committee would get involved in setting the fee and analyzing the costs. So the TAC, the controller would reconvene the TAC in order to help analyze the appropriate amount of the inclusionary affordable housing fee. Then that fee update would happen by, I think, January 31st, 2018, and then they would have an annual fee update. Then in section, I think it's subsection F, 415.5 F2B, for the use of the Small Sites Fund.
Can you refer to the page, too?
Oh, sure. It's on page 19, I think. I'm not sure all the page numbers are going to line up exactly.
Yeah, okay. It's page 18.
So it changes the use of that the properties would be affordable for the life of the project rather than just 55 years. Section, same section, page 22, subsection 3, where a project sponsor changes from on-site units to other types of compliance with the inclusionary housing requirements, it would require public notice for a hearing and reconsideration by the Planning Commission.
Right.
Section 415.6 for the on-site affordable housing alternative. There are some clarifications about how the units are calculated, and that's on page 24. And it includes a prohibition of studio units for any of the affordable units with purchase prices set at 130% of area median income. And further in that section on the next page, it's my page 25, the same prohibition for studio units, anything above 110% of AMI, studio units would not be permitted.
Right.
In all of the sections, there is a requirement to replace on-site affordable units that have been either demolished or removed, if they're rental units and affordable, or if they're designated affordable units. In addition to the inclusionary requirements, the project would replace the lost units. I think part of that was in the last draft, but there's just some clarifying language there. Excuse me. Then the minimum size of affordable units on page 32, and this is for on-site housing, subsection F2. The specific square footages have been deleted, and the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee sizes would be used, along with a minimum 300 square foot size for studio units.
Mm-hmm. And then, Ms. Stacy?
Yes.
And did you need to read on page 25 with regard to the annual increase for units between 10 and 24, or did you do that prior? Page 20, subsection 5. Section 415.6, on-site affordable housing alternative, and then it would be subsection 5. Did that need to be read, or was that done before?
I believe that change happened at the last round.
Great.
And then there are some more clarifications about how to calculate the number of affordable units. And this is throughout the ordinance, just to be sure that the total number of affordable units would not exceed the requirement. Because of the breakdown by income levels with the rounding required, it's just a clarification.
Right.
I think it was a recommendation from the Planning Department to make sure that those numbers didn't change. Mm-hmm. There were some changes to section 415.10. It starts on my page 42. Some of that text was moved into the fee calculation provision, and it changed the role of the Technical Advisory Committee somewhat. And then the changes to Section 207.7 included some exclusions of particular mixed-use districts. On page 44, Section A1, the ordinance now excludes RTO, RCD, NCT, DTR, and the Eastern Neighborhoods mixed-use districts from these minimum unit requirements. And then further down in A2, there was a clarification about what types of student housing would be excluded from this section. And as long as there's an accepted institutional master plan, student housing would be exempt from those dwelling unit requirements. Not all educational institutions are required to file institutional master plans, but for those that are, that would apply. And then the last change is on studio units, so that no more than 30% of the total number of proposed dwelling units in new construction would be studio units. Right. And that's the material modification that we advise should go back to planning for review.
Right. And that requires a 10-day notice, Ms. Rogers?
Good afternoon, Anne Marie Rogers. If it is determined to be a material modification, it is only a 10-day notice. But if the city attorney considers a substitute ordinance to be a new ordinance, it's a 20-day notice. So I would defer to the city attorney.
It's not. This is not a substitute, so it would be 10 days. Correct, Ms. Stacy? It's a material modification.
For a material modification, I'd have to check the code. I thought that it was all the notice requirements apply except for the newspaper notice.
The newspaper notice is shorter. It is only 10 days. I was just looking for confirmation that your office has decided that this is, in fact, just a material modification and not a new ordinance.
Correct.
Yes. Yes, so then we can have the hearing on July 6th.
Okay. Great. I think that's everything.
So thank you again to the City Attorney's Office, Kate Stacy. So I know a bunch of folks have come in. For those of you who did not hear, I know that there was some concern to make sure that areas that have been upzoned relative to height and or density receive fiscal feasibility analysis. And there was an issue about a date. And that date has been returned to January 1 of 2015, or is about to formally happen. I do want to, despite the fact that we are in the middle of budget hearings and I'm supposed to run back across the hallway and jump back into them, reopen public comment. If anybody has the need to comment, I do not want to discourage it. So I will reopen public comment if you must speak, but I just wanted you to know that that particular amendment well, it was kind of made, but will be formally made in a moment. So with that, are there any members of the public who would like to testify as quickly as possible? First speaker, please.
Thanks, Dean Preston. Thank you for indulging us and reopening public comment. I just wanted to clarify, because when you said that the date was going to be returned, so is the language in that provision on, I think it's page 25, A8, is that just going to stay intact? Or
it's the original language. It's now page 28, specific geographic areas, and the language that was in there originally is exactly, I believe, is exactly the same language. I actually compared it, and the only thing that changed was the June 15th, 2017 date was returned to the original language, which was the January 1st, 2015.
Great. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. So if there are no other members of the public, thank you for indulging us. I will reclose public comment, and then I would like to ask for a motion to make the amendments described by Deputy City Attorney Stacy.
So moved.
Moved, and we will take that without objection. We will then make the aforementioned amendment on page 29 at line 1 to change that date to January 1st of 2015. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And we will take that without objection. We will then duplicate the file And we will send forward with recommendation this file without Section 207.7 in whole. And is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Without objection. And then we will continue the duplicated file to the meeting of July the 10th, 2017. Do I have that right, Ms. Majors? That is a Monday?
Yes.
Okay. And we will do that without objection, and we are adjourned.